Welcome to the thought bubble.
I was gonna see how long that was gonna go.
It's just like, well, if she's not good, okay. I'm Stevie.
Hello, I am Ashley.
We also got Luna here, Luna boy. How you doing?
Hello, I am Lunar.
Yeah, Luna is our
Good
lovely
shit.
Vanna White for the evening.
What topics do you have? Because I definitely didn't forget that we were doing a show today.
I have so like last week I just had like kind of a list of books that I had I'd finally finished. And this time I've probably talked to you about this before, but in terms of like watching movies, especially on like streaming services or whatever, I started to finally feel that choice paralysis that people talk about, where there's like all these thousands of things that are displayed for you and advertised to you that you want to see, or you at least have a passing interest in, that maybe you want to explore a new thing that doesn't directly catch your eye. Um, and it's just like because of all these, it's just like, well, I want to pick the right one that I'm not going to feel like, I would have had a better time with the other thing, when there's too many pieces of media out. Um,
Yeah.
and I saw two things that I was surprised by how much I liked over the weekend. Um, I saw Wonka and I saw that Mean Girls musical. The two things that came out recently that were infamous for not properly advertising that they were a musical and just looking like a movie.
Yeah, it was very weird to have, like, I guess musicals just have a reputation that they didn't want to associate with.
Yeah, I will say of the two, like I liked both, but of the two, I vastly preferred Wonka. Um and partially because there was like have you seen Wonka? You don't It doesn't feel like it'd be your kind of
No.
thing. Yeah,
No,
so
I'll
for
watch
those
the
who
old one if I want that, anything to do with Wonka.
So, like, if you don't know what Wonka is, for any of you who've missed that train, so it's pretty simply like that old Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory movie, the prequel to it, starring Timothy Chalamet. And I didn't realize until about 5 minutes in. Oh wait, this is my first time seeing Timothy Chalamet in anything. I never
Yeah.
got around to a Timothy Chalamet thing because I waited for Dune 2 to come out to see Dune 1 because I heard that Dune 1 is kind of an incomplete experience without it. And that would have been my first thing. Um but yeah, it's there was a like in the whole atmosphere of how he conducted himself and how the world around him kind of worked had a sort of cinematic whimsy to it that I hadn't really seen since like 2008 in like a big blockbuster movie. Like there was fuck Harry Potter, but like the last time I saw the specific kind of vibe that this had that I liked so much, world building that frankly the visual aspects of it I think J.K. Rowling had very little to do with, but the last time I saw that was in a Harry Potter movie when I was a kid. And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I forgot you could do that in the movies." And it was very unabashed about it. There were some really catchy songs. Yes, they did do Pure Imagination. And that was beautiful. Yeah, I didn't expect to put it up there with Hairspray, my favorite musical, but I think I gotta. It's just that fucking good.
Damn.
Though what's weird
Because you don't
is
shut the
that
fuck up about Hairspray.
right, every single day I find a reason to to sing another song for Hairspray. But yeah, so in 15 years I have no, in 17 years. Yeah, in 17 years I haven't found one that I like as much as Hairspray, and this is kind of neck and neck with it. The one kind of confusing thing is Willy Wonka seems to come from a very British mother. Like she's the same lady who plays the mom in Paddington, which funnily enough a lot of the people who made the movie also made Paddington. And the comparison I drew to Harry Potter, some of them also had a hand in that. But excuse me, that same lady also plays the mom in this, who is a very notoriously British lady, and he's going from there to this very British town with just scattered American people in it. That like you don't really notice the jarring kind of difference there, but when you're looking back on it, it's like, oh yeah, there's like a weird amount of American people, including the titular character, surrounded by British shit, including their own personal heritage, in this very British style movie. And so I started to get confused by that, but it is such a whimsical and like optimistic, but not naively so, kind of just hopeful, good, bouncy time. And oh, and it says a lot of good shit about like, big mean corporations like shutting down local businesses and passion projects and stuff. And that's kind of the whole point of it. And yeah, I don't think there was a single musical number that I didn't at least passively enjoy.
It's always very fun to me when big blockbuster Hollywood says, "Go watch our thing about how we suck."
Yeah, yeah. It's it's the entire literally the entire point besides just the dreams of Willy Wonka himself. And well, okay, sorry. The dreams of him are like the main point. He does take the dreams of other people with him and try and like elevate those as well. But like the other half of the point of the movie is yeah, conglomerates suck. And they've got all sorts of shady under the table bullshit going on. And yeah, but it's like, oh no, we're not like these corporations. Yeah. Mm. Yeah, and Mean Girls
See,
was
I've
fun too, but it
been
had a very different vibe, of course.
a thing that I've been surprised at how much I like it again is I've been watching superhero movies, but not Marvel because I'm fucking sick of them. But I've been going back, and even for some of the newer DC stuff, is fucking amazing. And like revisiting these stories because I haven't really been keeping up with a lot of DC in recent years. Um, there's that old adage that like, oh, Marvel, DC is like, oh, there's gods among the people, and then Marvel's like, oh, but the people have godlike powers, but they're not gods, they're still people. And I just don't.
Mhm.
That's not a very like fair comparison as far as I've been watching the newer stuff and even going back and watching older DC stuff. It's not that oh the gods are among men, it's that the gods are men. That's the entire like thesis
Mhm.
statement of Superman. Is he's a god, but that's not who he is. He is a mild-mannered Clark Kent at his heart. Everything he
Yeah,
does is from that, very human standpoint. And that's just
and the
something that
god
that
with
hit me.
and the godlike figure like that decides to disregard the humanity aspect of it. That because that's like General Zod's whole thing, isn't it? And he's
Yeah.
like, he's a genocidal fucking maniac. Yeah.
But yeah, like it, I think a more apt comparison to what Marvel does differently from DC, good DC anyway. I'm not talking about the live action movies. Um, for the most part, there's mostly the Batman stuff is pretty good,
That
but
is what initially confused me about you saying, "Yeah, I especially love the newer DC stuff." And I'm like, "Oh wait, I
the newer
forgot she doesn't."
DC animated stuff, there
Yeah,
is animated stuff being done. You apparently hate superhero animation, so
we'll go over that, but but just continue your point.
but a better way to like differentiate between Marvel and DC is about icons and ideas more than it is always about the kind of people. Like Marvel is very very person focused to where in DC the universe is a living thing that needs these ideals to exist. So it's like, oh, when they go into an alternate dimension, there's still a Batman, even if it's not Bruce Wayne, even if it's not even any Wayne. There's still a Batman. There's still a Superman, even if it's not Clark Kent. Because the universe needs these things, these ideas, these sparks of hope, and those that go against it to be balanced. Whereas Marvel doesn't do as much of that kind of thinking for their storytelling.
Yeah, they tend to do that in very specific contexts, like Spider-Verse sort of stories and shit. Because like that's the only one that like immediately comes to mind in terms of a Spider-Man, like in terms of a Marvel thing where it could have been just a completely different person who did it. Like for instance, like Penny Parker or Peter. Well, no, those are all Parkers. Hold on, give me a moment. It took me this fucking long cooking up that point to notice that.
But it's
Ben
like
O'Reilly
in
is yeah another one. Yeah.
yeah, it's like in the Flashpoint stories when Instead of Bruce's parents getting shot, Bruce gets shot, and so his dad becomes Batman instead. And he's a very different kind of Batman, but it is still something fairly similar that the universe needs to keep going. And I think that is the main difference between DC and Marvel in my experience. That, like, Marvel is more specific person focused rather than idea focused.
Like, I the thing about the Batman specific one for me is I would kind of need to. I feel like I need to understand how his dad came to the exact same bat-centered conclusion as to what his iconography would be. You know, if it because I would have I would ironically have fewer questions if it turned out that Thomas Wayne like decided to go, I don't know, Snake Man or Bumblebee Man or something like that, you know, or the playing card, like just something completely different, maybe even like more relevant to their actual like rich person lifestyle, like, you know, maybe, you know, just so uh, hi, hey dude, we got a show going on here. Um, thank you. Um, yeah, I would be like I'd be less confused by it ironically if he didn't just so happen to also land on bats.
It's not always a bat. There's
Okay.
Owlman as well as an alternate universe one. I think it's Thomas specifically went bats for the same reason that Bruce initially went, is because there were a shit ton of bats in that alley for some reason.
Oh, in that specific alley? Oh, okay. I think I
That's
misremembered
why
the story.
Batman is Batman.
Ah, okay. I because my understanding of it, because I the last time I saw it, I was pretty fucking young, like his origin story. But the way I remembered it was his parents got killed, but also he had this traumatic experience with bats as a completely separate piece of trauma that he then referred back to, and which makes a lot less sense now that I say it out loud. but but like that's how it always went in my head though, because I'm like, oh yeah, why would there be bats in this alleyway in this metropolitan city? You know,
You really asked a question of why is abnormal thing in a comic?
yeah,
The
like,
classic blunder.
well, I don't know. There's got to be a threshold of where like abnormal thing in a comic can be brushed off as, oh yeah, that just works a separate way in this universe, and abnormal thing in a comic as it, no, that needs a little bit of explaining. And I feel like that point's different for many people. Oh, oh, okay. Sorry, I thought they were talking about a separate thing over there. Um, right. Yeah, I'm not saying it makes no sense. It just it. Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, no, I'm sure there's a way it could make sense. Yeah. Hold on. Oh, I can't click on your name tag anymore. Oh yeah, no, you're good. You're good. Sorry, I just like was frantically trying to megaphone you and also like keep an eye on the megaphone button. Yeah, there we go. But yeah, no, thank you for the tidbit though. That did add some good insights here. Um, yeah. Um,
But yeah, I've been getting more into DC again recently, and that's just it's a thing that I've noticed that it's not really, oh, there's gods amongst men. It's really that there are these ultimately powerful humans,
mhm.
and I
I,
remember that being a
I
sticking point for you. Is like, oh, but they're treated like gods, and it's like not really, not in any of the really good material.
that's mostly been the pitfall of like me more gravitating towards the live action counterparts, just because
Yeah,
that's like,
because
yeah.
you hate superhero animation.
I think that's a bit of an exaggeration. I like, so here's my thing. So what I realized in a conversation with Ashley like over a month ago probably was, as much as I love animation in my heart and soul, and I love superheroes like just as deeply, I started to notice, outside of very specific exceptions, they actually take a entirely separate interest for me for the most part. where it's like, because when I was introduced to superheroes as a kid, like comics were involved, and it's not like they were rarely involved, but the focus was much more entwined with it was much more like accompanied by how much I love movies and being introduced to those. It's like, oh, we're picking a movie to watch. Ah, superhero movie, you know. And so that was just how I started associating the superhero media that I love. And then like when I eventually would turn to watching superhero like animated shows or movies, I'm like, oh, this kind of just it's hard to explain, but it has this like different tone to it that doesn't click the same way. And so I started just going, well, I mean, I already know that I like the way that XYZ movie does. Like, for instance, at the time I was a kid, so at the time, like the Raimi trilogy, you know, probably, at some point, the Amazing Spider-Man, and also one that isn't Spider-Man at some point. No, The Dark Knight would have been another one, and of course, like the Marvel Cinematic Universe in its like first and second phases, around these times.
Yeah.
And
It
yeah, it's just
it
like
could
the,
also be
the
a way that like I know fairly differently from most people
oh, sorry, can you
because
can you
of
repeat
our
that?
old movie podcast. You consume media fairly differently than most people, I presume, considering the time that we did the movie podcast about John Wick. I basically had to retell you the story at
Yeah,
times because you just weren't watching, apparently.
the, that's not with every movie, I should know, but it is with a surprising amount of them where it's just like I know for a lot of movies, especially like so if it's a movie where I'm not like invested in the whole universe of it, like something like a John Wick at the time, because now it's got a whole universe. But with something like an isolated thing like John Wick, I tend to remember little splotches of things that I liked from it, and little in the what I think are the most important pieces of the motivation for it, but not necessarily how they're connected or maybe even the sequence of them sometimes, aside from like obviously, oh, of course, spoiler alert, John Wick's dog dies, and that leads him to go kill people eventually in like all these different places. But the order of those places and the reason that order takes place may not be where my brain latches on to the first few times I watch it. Um, but I'll understand based on the basic story, this splotch of things, and then this splotch of things, and then for some reason the finer details go the way that they do. And I think that's why there was such glaring gaps, because it's like, oh yeah, no, Steve, it makes sense that like, he would go from here, and then like that would for this reason that he found here, he would go here, and then here, and then here. And I'm like, yes, that makes sense. But as I'm watching, like certain times when my brain would like recharge, like because my brain inherently, um, like my brain when I'm watching a piece of media, especially if there's a lot going on in it, I'll take little like few seconds spans of time where it's like, oh, this piece of dialogue doesn't look like it's ultra important to the story, so I'll just like not listen for that specific part so that I could just like cement that last scene in my head. And oftentimes, oh, that told you exactly why that they're doing the next thing. And so it's not just another thing that they're doing that is connected to the previous thing for a reason you don't know. Um, and so that's why it sometimes takes me multiple times for a specific movie. But yeah, so yeah,
Your
that could
brain
be
just
involved
hears
with
words and was just like, nah, I'm good.
there could be something in there. I'm sure there's something in there, but it's not good. And here's the thing. I think like if I'm not specifically looking to go, oh, there's something I missed in this movie, which doesn't happen often as a specific like conscious thought, but unless I choose to go against that, every time I rewatch it, I think around that same time I'm still going to stop paying attention for that same general span of time. And so I'll still like associate a movie consistently with like those same feelings and that same love of how I, experienced it, but while also not having these pieces and thinking certain things don't make sense that actually do. Um, so yeah, that could feed into part of why the animated stuff never hooked me as much. But also, you tell me if I'm wrong on this one, by the way. The in the way that there's so much like dynamic, bouncy, fluid animation in like a in like a bounce and stretch sort of sense, like really prioritizing that principle with something like a Looney Tune, like you would see it in Spider Ham and like Into the Spider Verse.
Hmm.
Is there a lot of superhero media that's got like deep and impactful writing and structured story and everything that also has that going on with it?
Well, I
Because that's
feel
part of the
like
appeal of
probably
animation.
not as much. Anything with Plastic Man is going to have some of that because of the
Right.
nature of Plastic Man.
Right.
But like, if you went and watched the Injustice adaptation, which I don't necessarily suggest everybody do, the adaptation from game and comic to having an animated movie. Um, Plastic Man is in that one. He's a big focus of it, in fact, and he has a lot of those kinds of principles in it. A lot of DC, when it comes down to it, is focused on those stories and less about being a little more silly all the time, which an animation style like that would probably necessitate you being a little more silly most of the time, which is probably why they don't do it.
Okay. Yeah,
Because it would
it's
be very
this
distracting. I feel like it would distract you even more from what they're saying.
yeah, it's this weird like dilemma because it's um because at the same time, okay, so at the same time as that's right, it would be like a bouncier animation would be a little more distracting. Well, okay, I will say, okay, we're gonna get into a difficult thing here that I just realized, but I'm gonna start with the point that I was originally saying. Um, so while it would be conflicting because it wouldn't necessarily match with more serious storytelling, when I'm looking at an animation like the DC animation that we most of the time know, where it's like structured like how a human being moves for the most part, like real more on the realistic end of things. If I'm watching that kind of structured realistic animation, I'm like, that is well made and I enjoy that. But also as a viewer myself, if I'm watching something with that kind of structured aesthetic, I'm like, oh, okay, why am I not just watching a live action thing then? That's the
Because you
feeling
can
that
get better silhouettes in animation.
you
You can
can.
work with the design a lot easier than an actual human face. Do you think any actual human looks like Superman from the animated series?
Oh no, I'm not saying it's a one to one. I, I'm just saying that
Like, there is a
like
distinct difference in feel for me watching a buff actual man and seeing Superman in the animated series. It is a very different feel.
because like I've always been of the mind of if I'm watching something animated, then oh okay, take advantage of that and do things that like not necessarily don't resemble at all genuine human proportions, but like really make you sound like you're basically dealing with plasticine here. And I will say the exception to the rule of like something that has this is something that has lots of it takes advantage of more of the properties of animation of like not necessarily rubbery, but it's a lot stretchier and a lot bouncier, but while retaining a serious story, referring back to Spider-Verse. I think that that has a distinctly different feel from the DC animation that I've seen, where
Well,
it
yeah,
like
you
yeah.
can't necessarily compare a masterpiece to a TV show. I do want to say
I'm not
that before we get into it. I will agree their style is very different and do make use of a lot more squash and stretch. Yeah, that's the right words. I don't know why that was
squash
giving me
and
such a
stretch.
hard time to
Yeah.
figure out. Um, they do make a lot more explicit use out of it, especially since they are trying to be more one to one with a comic brought to life. Um, but the DC anime stuff isn't devoid of things like that. They use more exaggeration than squash and stretch, though, which is another huge part of animation. That's one of the pillars.
Yeah, maybe I've just not seen enough of that. Yeah, like if I feel like I don't know if you've already done this before, but I'd like you to like send me because I remember there was someone she was on the last episode, she gave some insights on wasn't Battlestar Galactica. That was somebody else. Who what was it? It was Warhammer 40K, that's what it was. And they
Hmm.
sent me like she sent me a list of like their favorite little pieces of the way too fucking large lore of Warhammer 40K. And I'm like, yeah, just send me enough that I'll never have to go off of this list. And so I'm tempted to say with you, like, the ones where it more prioritizes that, I'd love to be proven wrong. So just like if you have a
Um,
list.
Also, a good DC animated show that just revels in its animation is Teen Titans.
Yeah, right. Okay, that's one that I yeah, that was an exception to the rule. That one I grew up with. Yeah. I almost
And
forgot about that one. Teen
since I'm
Titans
not
was
in
beautiful.
VR, I can just literally look
Yeah.
up DC animated shows.
Yeah, so Teen Titans Go kind of did a lot of things I didn't like, though in animation it did exactly what we're asking for here. But yeah, Teen Titans was fucking awesome. That is definitely like that went right next to it's funny. It's similarly to when I was saying that, like, oh, superhero movies were more a kind of movie than a kind of superhero media for me when I was a kid. Um, Teen Titans was more a kind of cartoon than a kind of superhero media. I don't know why it just had to be lumped in with everything else. Like, if you're watching SpongeBob or Fairly Odd Parents, you know,
I do not think those are the same demographics,
they're not the
probably.
same demographic, but they did come on at like around the same time, and it was cable, so whatever.
I'm just imagining somebody who like just started watching TV and got really into SpongeBob, then flipping over to some of the episodes of Teen Titans, and it's just like that's not appropriate.
Yeah. Well, no, because I'm like, if I remember correctly, it was like just in this cycle of cable, like they would have Fairly Odd Parents, and then not much longer later, they were no, because wasn't Teen Titans Cartoon Network? I think I'm mincing networks now,
I think it was. Yeah,
because which is extra weird, because I just remembered I didn't have Cartoon Network growing up. Did I just see the DVDs? No, I don't think that's true.
They played on
That
other
can't be
stations
right.
beside Cartoon Network. Because I saw
Sorry,
them
what?
on like basic cable that my grandmother had,
Oh, okay,
and we only got like 12 channels or something. So,
sure. Do you remember what specific network you saw Teen Titans on if it wasn't Cartoon Network?
um, I don't know. It was like the PBS channel, but that had like Dragon Tales and stuff like that.
Well,
Um,
I know I saw Dragon Tales. I
now I really
maybe
want
it
to
was on.
see the moment where
Teen
Maybe it was
Titans and
on
somebody's
Dragon
kid is
Fox.
Tales.
watching Dragon Tales and it goes over to like Robin's fucking PTSD episode.
Oh my god. Yeah, thankfully I think
Hey,
Dragon
Dragon
Tales will be like
Tales
6
covered
hours earlier than Teen
PTSD.
Titans.
I'm pretty sure.
What?
Dragon Tales covered a lot of stuff.
Did Dragon Tales cover
Did
PTSD? Are you
I
fucking
I
kidding
I
me?
think
can't
so.
imagine if it did, it was the same tone.
No, it probably wasn't the same tone, but I'm pretty sure they did cover like, PTSD and
Like
stuff.
you could talk to kids about almost anything, but you can't do it in the same way you would an
Yeah.
adult.
I God, wait, what was that? Oh, there was like that episode of that like it was a cartoon show that like a lot that's like an iconic nostalgic thing from I don't remember if it was the 80s or the 90s, but there was an episode of it where it was just weirdly solemn and it scarred some kids. I don't I don't remember what it might have had to do with it wasn't drugs because that was the PSA thing, but it had to do with some kind of loss. No, it was I don't think it was this, but I think it was similar to the Saved by the Bell episode where they like showed the dangers of using speed. I'm so excited. I'm so scared. That whole thing. Yeah, which that's obviously butchering it, but it was something
The
similar to
only
that.
thing that's coming to mind is Avatar: The Last
Yeah.
Airbender, but I know that's not it, probably.
Yeah, no, because that I would expect deep shit from on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Was that Hey Arnold show where they just like Vietnam flashbacks?
Are you fucking
Oh,
kidding me?
yeah.
That I don't even think that
Yeah.
was it, but now I want to know what this is.
Well, that's just part of an episode because one of the characters' father fought, I think, in Vietnam, and so like he has a flashback at some point.
I
and
want to
like they
say it
show
was
it fully.
fucking just like gore on PBS Kids. No, I I'm tempted to think it was a Ninja Turtle.
Yeah.
Yeah, my brain keeps veering off of that though, because I also know the Ninja Turtles were part of that like anti-drug PSA, and I don't think that was it. But I do think there was like a thing about like loss, but it was involved in something else that was analogous to like drugs or something else that was dangerous. It's screaming at me because I feel like I could see a screenshot of it in my head.
I wouldn't be surprised to hear that's from a DC show.
I Here's the thing, it wouldn't be out of place in a DC show. This was a thing that it
Yeah.
was distinctly out of place for the people watching it.
Oh,
Is the point I make. I
yeah.
don't know. I'll eventually find out and then like scream at myself and then then bring it back
Yeah,
to an episode
right
and
as
then
we end the show. And
right
so there's no
as we
record
end the
of it.
show, Joe Lasky. But yeah, of course I have I made sure I memorized that fucking guy's name after that episode where it took me like fucking 20 minutes after the show stopped. Not after the show stopped, after we supposed to stop. Yeah.
But
You
yeah,
were
all
looking
that
for
to say,
DC
I really
shows.
like the DC shows. They're very good.
Yeah.
They tackle a lot of subjects that I don't think many shows now still tackle. Um, which is like, there's a whole storyline where I think it's Jason Todd. It's one of the Robins dies. I want to say it's Jason Todd. And he eventually gets brought back. And when he gets brought back, he finds out that like Joker had killed him. He knew that because he was killed by him, but comes back and he's like, Batman, why haven't you taken down the Joker yet? And it goes, captures Joker, puts him at gunpoint, and is like, it hands Bruce a gun, and is like, either there's only two reasons that the Joker isn't dead right now, and it's either you did not love me enough that my death pushed you to kill, or your mission is taking you over and we need to figure this out. So either you shoot the Joker and give up on your mission because you love me too much to continue in it, or you kill me because the mission is more important than me. And it's like, god damn, this is a children's show. And I love it.
But children can't take heavy topics. We need to dangle keys in front of them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I say children, I mean like teenagers. You probably shouldn't let your like
Yeah.
7-year-old watch that one. But
It depends what 7-year-old, I think.
but there's some amazing discussions happening inside of DC shows, movies, everything. Um, absolute thumbs up. Also, go read the comics if that's your thing. I don't read as
Sure.
much comics as I should.
I'm getting back into comics in a second. I was like 5 minutes from doing that like last week, and then something pulled me away from it. But I am definitely gonna, because I remember
What comics are you reading?
the last time I was like in a big stretch of reading comics, I would, because the mindset I was in, I don't think this is a good idea. What I'm about to say, it's not a horrible idea, but I don't recommend it as a way of consuming comics for those interested. I'm like, oh, I want to finish a run and then like finish a run that I'm reading and then start reading the next one instead of like reading multiple concurrent ones, which I eventually learned to do that with. I made the same mistake with novels, like books, but I then learned, yeah, read like a few parallel ones, especially because you might want to break from the flavor of the one that you're reading, you know, and then you could just go to another kind. And so I, gonna be honest, from when I was trying out reading Spider-Man as like my, hey, here's my first stop, something that I largely know, but obviously there's plenty of shit I'm gonna find that I don't know yet in here. I think this is going to be a great introductory point. And because I didn't finish that, I never got to another one. But I do plan on Fantastic Four, X-Men, Batman, maybe some lesser known ones as well. Something with Nightwing in it, I'd like. I'd also like for the gimmicky aspect of it. I love those. I have saved a bunch of comic book adaptations of movies. So the other way around from what I'm used to. I think that's a fun dichotomy.
No.
I do know that I finished the one for Mask of the Phantasm. I finished that start to finish. I loved that.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I'm gonna try to read the Injustice comics again, at least the first half of them, because they swap writers after like the third year of the story. I hear it doesn't get as good again. So
Am I remembering correctly that the comics came from like the game is what started the Injustice 2 story, and like that was adapted into a comic then a movie?
it was eventually a movie. It was kind of cross media. The comics and game were kind of made together.
Oh, okay. I thought it was the game. I heard it was that the game was so popular and so beloved in its story that they're like, we should probably make a comic out of this.
I don't think so. I could be wrong, but I
Okay.
don't think so. I want to say it was like around the same time.
Okay. Well, then I'm also going to read that. But before that, I do want to read Superman Red Sun because I feel like those are two
Yeah.
good like those are like it's a good double feature, so to speak. Yeah. Though I feel like that's going
What's
to rip a chunk
crazy,
out of
I
me if I
haven't
read them
read the
together.
comic, but apparently the movie adaptation is fairly different in message.
Oh, the
Yeah.
one place you don't want it to be different.
Well, no, they just have different stories that they're telling.
Oh, okay.
It's not one's bad and one's good. They're both
Oh,
good.
okay. You seem
They
like
just
you
have
had mixed
different
feelings
stories.
when I've heard you talk about the movie. Yeah.
What, Red Sun? I love Red Sun.
Oh, I thought you meant Injustice too. I
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, no, the Injustice movie is not as good.
Oh,
Period.
okay. Now I'm mixed differently. Okay. You like both the movie and there was a movie of Red Sun?
Yeah.
I only heard of the comic version of it. But yeah, so you like the movie and the comic, but there are two different messages to it, like two
Yeah,
different ways
apparently
of
they're
telling the
two
story.
different things.
Okay. Wait, apparently. So which one have you not consumed yet?
The comic.
Oh,
See what I'm
okay.
saying about like they just don't listen to words. Because I said that like twice, and then you asked me again.
Well, because I remember, I think.
Timing.
Oh my god, I just took a drink too. I almost spat everywhere. Oh my god. I love VR.
Yeah, I crashed out of the space. But like, oh wait, I'm still microphone. Okay. So I think what the problem there with like the Red Sun thing was I think it was I thought I remembered you talking about the Red Sun comic like in private and like as a comic and not as a movie. And so I think having heard you say that you saw the movie but didn't read the comic, I think I was like, "Oh, I must have misheard that because that doesn't match up with what you said before." But I think I'm just misremembering things. Yeah.
Yeah, no, the movie for Injustice, not as good. I'd recommend you read the comics and play the game. If you want that story, which is a great story. I love it. Um, they just have a lot going on in the movie that isn't nearly as interesting. And it's like instead of having a line of comics and an entire game to tell a story, you only have the amount of time in a movie. So they cut a bunch of shit that I think is very important to the storytelling of it. Like you don't see Superman's like slow descent into being an autocrat. It is just basically instant in the movie, which is not as interesting at all.
Oh, okay.
Because for in the comic, you could very easily, and I think you were supposed to be on his side for a good long time before he finally crosses that last bit. The comic is about idolizing somebody to the point where you let their inadequacies go and you don't really stop them because you've just like if Superman started a slow decline into being an autocrat for a very long time, I think most people would be beside him because it's like, well, he's not been leading me astray before. He's this paragon of virtue.
Yeah,
And that's what the
it's
entire
yeah.
story's about for the first like 3 years of it, of Superman. It's especially specifically the Flash just lets shit happen because he idolizes
Mhm.
Superman and he's one of the last ones to be like, I don't agree with this anymore, Superman.
Yeah, things like that are kind of the reason why, as much as like for some of this stuff, you're not really like you're not intended to pick it apart in terms of like in storytelling language, because it's like it's got a message to send in its specific story. But it's the reason why I think it's actually reasonably healthy to look at certain stories of people who are supposed to be idolized and in the prime of them, like, oh yes, everybody agrees with them and how they did this, and go, actually, what are little tiny things that, as much as like, Superman shouldn't lie looking up at the excuse me, looking up at the ceiling and not going, why the fuck did I not do that thing differently? But like, just how could Superman have done that differently so that it would have been slightly better? In certain stories where we tend to agree with him, so that we can look at, people who we question less in real life and make a practice out of questioning them more. Because the one that I specifically think of is there is a famous Superman story. It's a beautiful story where there's this woman that is standing on the edge of a building. You might know where I'm going with this. This woman that's standing on the edge of the building, and the police are down at the bottom. This is in the middle of a metropolitan city, probably Metropolis, and she's about to jump. She's like, all these terrible things have happened in my life, just one after another. I had so much hope you know, coming out of my youth, and I'm just like, I'm beat, and I want to end this. And Superman, like, the police want him to go up there and like force her to come down, like, take her physically and put her down on the ground safely. But instead, like, he goes up there and does there's the whole thing of like talking to her and waiting for her to be ready, to confront these issues further, take a break. The only thing that I had a problem with in his approach when he's listening to her problems, and he's saying, here, I knew someone with kind of similar problems here. And it's the whole thing of, they were absolutely convinced that they were never going to have another happy day, you know, in their entire life. They made their decision. I respect their decision. I don't agree with it, don't approve of it. Still, didn't at the time, still don't. But they made that decision out of their own free will. And so, if you believe, if you honestly believe that you'll never have another happy day, then walk forward off the edge of the building. I won't stop you. And, but, if you don't, if you think even a little bit that you might have another one, then come and I'll catch you. Uh, and the only thing I had a problem with in this whole thing was they had like a time lapse midway through this conversation where she's like, I think she's like, I don't want to talk about this anymore for a little bit, or can I have a break? I need a breather here. And he said, when you're ready to talk, I'll be here. And they have a little bit where it like transitions into nighttime because it started in daytime. And I think the implication is Superman was just floating there that entire time. And I'm like, how many crimes went on while he was just floating there?
Secular Jade has joined the
And
stage.
Well, there are
even
other
if
superheroes.
but I'm just like, oh shit, I can't reach that thing. If only Superman were here, but he's dealing with exactly one person right now, this entire 12-hour span. I'm not saying that I'm right about like the fact that he was just staying there, literally staying there the entire time. But I'm saying if he did, while it's like a sweet thing and it's the proper way to handle this specific situation, this person also like could take a different approach to it, hypothetically, if that is what they did. And it's like good to question these stories and because like for instance, someone who I tend to question less than other people because they're obviously smarter than either of us, and I've agreed with the vast majority of things they've said over the course of their career, like a Green brother, Hank Green, John Green, you know, uh, there's someone I would question less than other people.
They said some pretty
But it's like,
iffy things, in my opinion.
I mean, if you wanna talk about it, then feel
Especially
free.
recently.
Wait.
Like in the
Oh, what did I
education
miss? Okay.
videos, like go and watch the history of like countries and shit like that on Crash Course
Okay.
History. hosted by Hank Green's brother.
The John, you mean John, or did they have a
Yeah,
third
that
one I
one.
didn't know about? Okay.
They've also been notoriously silent about anything going on with Israel and Palestine, and recently came out
Yeah,
and said, "Oh, but we just don't know enough." And it's like, you're an educator. Go learn it. Make a decision. Be a grown up. Like,
Yeah. Well,
the internet is right here.
I am not saying that you're wrong, but where I put that, where I kind of compartmentalize that in my head is because he's also been he's also been a big promoter of like, oh, uh and I'm not saying this was the right way to apply this specific ideal, but like you can't worry about too many things at once because like that'll overwhelm you. You need to pick a certain few specific things that you will worry about and talk about and spread your knowledge about like more intensely. And so like he focuses on things like climate change rather than necessarily wars that are going on. And so he's not like a general journalist. He has these specific
I
things that
want
are.
to just jump in because you said war. Let's say it what it is. It's genocide.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, most war is a kind of genocide. I'm not the war sucks and is awful.
It is
Like,
right now 1 million people being bombed. It is not a war.
yes. Well,
It is straight up killing.
yeah. War is when
yeah. I
like two militaries fight each other, and genocide is where a military murders civilians in mass, which is currently going on in Palestine today, right now.
I
And the
guess I
Green
did have a
Brothers
flawed wording
have
in it, but I
made
do agree with
no
you.
statements on it other than they don't know enough, which I don't think that's true.
I think you do have a point there. I I
Especially
I
since it's really fun. They've made a video about Palestine in the past, but they don't know enough. Sure.
yeah. Yeah. I'm gonna
I'm
need
not
to
saying
I'm
they're
gonna need to
horrible
simmer on that one.
people. I'm not
Yeah, no.
saying, but it's
Yeah.
like this is another one of you don't want paragons in your
Right,
life.
exactly. This is a good example. This is basically, yeah, the point that we were making anyway. Yeah, that like the people who we look up to will make mistakes, and like as much as that's something that you expect more of, like, oh, of course, and like we put that in like children's media, but I do think a lot of people still tend to forget that into their adulthood because it's exhausting to question people too much, but it's also kind of fucking necessary. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Because like we like to pretend the messages that we put in children's media of well, I mean, and I mean, a lot of what we've been talking about isn't even children's media, but like I'm more referring to it in children's media where I don't know, let's say like accepting people and asking questions and like critical thinking and things like that. We're like, oh yeah, we don't want to get all preachy in our media in ways that we just tend to serve to kids as they're growing up. But then a good handful of those kids tend to completely forget about those things when they're going to vote or treat another human being a certain way or make a decision where they have power over other people and how they enact on a certain issue. And so yeah, maybe it's not so preachy, maybe it's actually fucking necessary. I mean, it's a lot like how Star Trek would cover a lot of those things even though it wasn't specifically intended for children.
Yeah. Star Trek is
Yeah,
probably the most preachy show in all of
yeah,
existence.
very good at it.
But
Yeah.
it's that is another whole matter of just propaganda really supersedes what you actually believe a lot of the time,
Mm-hmm.
because it's one of those things to where like my stepfather votes red every election, doesn't even know the names sometimes, but he's like, I'm a Republican through and through, I'm conservative. But whenever I asked him his thoughts on certain policies and things without bringing up the political divide or bringing up
Mm-hmm.
those buzzwords like socialism and things like that, he tends to think very left because at the core, it's about caring about people. Most people care about their fellow person. Conservatism recently has not been caring about people. So it's like when you ask people their thoughts on like, oh, healthcare costs should be down as near to zero as possible. If you hit zero, great. Um, you know, things like that, and it's people want that in a general sense. But once you say universal healthcare, that's when people stop listening. That's when people stop
Yeah, once you
caring
put a
because that's
buzzword in
that's
there
the
that somebody's
programming.
yeah, yeah.
And I'm not saying I'm immune to it. I'm not this high and mighty. Like, I get fucked up for propaganda time to time. I
Sure.
definitely say shit that's incorrect just because I've been told it so many times. But it's one of those things, like, you need to hear the correct thing a lot for it to supersede those bad things you hear a lot. So, like, preachy media needs to exist.
Yeah, and it needs to not just be for I don't know where I got into oh yeah, I think the reason that I stayed on the topic of children's media in relation to this is because of the like what if we showed kids the grief episode of XYZ. But
Yeah.
but yeah, just question everything to a healthy extent anyway. Don't burn yourself out, but as much as you can, you know, cuz it never stops being necessary.
Try to find the truth, have hope, love your fellow humans, and you'll probably have a good life.
Yeah. Cuz like oh, and especially with like hope with stuff like hope, because a lot of people tend to be like, oh, like because it is easier to when like a lot of awful shit is happening to lose hope, and I'm like, yeah, that's understandable, but it's also did you like if the world actually collapses around you, did you want to be the person that submits to it, or did you want to be the person that like I don't know, poked a few holes in that bullshit and like, let in just a little bit of light, even if it didn't save anything, just made it a little bit better and like can now represent what you did and who you were as part of this whole system. Not even assuming it's going to collapse, but under the hypothetical.
Yeah. And to bring it back around to DC, that's what some of the
Sure.
best DC media is about, especially centering around Superman, who is Paragon of Hope. He is
Mhm.
there to provide that hope. There is one story, I forget the exact title. I'm going to have to look it up. Give me 2 seconds. The Superman versus the Elite. That is all about I think it was specifically 90s superhero cynicism of like, oh, these paragons of idealistic justice and hope and things like that aren't actually making the world better. And so there's this other superhero team called the Elite, who is another very powerful superhero team, but they go around killing the bad guys, so they can't go around
Mm.
doing horrible things again. But it's like at the end it's shown that, like, even if, like, you do want to kill them all, you have to have hope in humanity that, like, there is a good person under every horrible person
Oh yeah.
and that they can become better. And you can't just go around dealing out endless justice in quotes, just because it feels right and you want to,
Yeah.
because it
And
isn't
it's
right.
like at the end of the day also like you're yeah. No, actually I don't think I don't think I agree with what I was about to say. I'm going to backtrack on that. But
I do
but
I do like the
you know,
fact that I hear people come in and then we're talking about all these fucking topics and then they just leave.
yeah,
It's
whatever.
really funny because it is like, how are people supposed to come in the middle of this conversation?
Like I think it's the nature of this show. But yeah, it's I think
Yeah.
the same thing of cynicism around hope icons is I think what has led me to get like I mean I'm not gonna daisy around the bush here. I got like for a good couple of years, I got really annoying about how tired I was of like because you specifically heard about like my points in negative endings, and I think the reason I got so frustrated with so many negative endings and things was because that was partnered with um superhero media like The Boys and Invincible that okay, I'm not gonna say Invincible because I haven't seen enough of it to make a judgment call. I'm gonna focus on The Boys because I think because they're okay. I think pieces of media like that come from a fair place originally of like, hey, just making sure that you're, that you're not blindly following these people, and also like, hey, we could use something that contrasts the superheroes are beautiful and wonderful and like icons of idealistic hope, and now it's like here's this thing that contrasts it that does things that those pieces of media can't. But I do think those eventually devolved into, oh yeah, you can't have a good superhero and these things are for nothing, and also things suck, and also let's just and then I mean then it just evolved into let's do violent and violent dark shit for the sake of it. But it was like, what point are you really trying to make here? Like at the end of the day, because I thought this is yeah. I don't really know if I have much else to say on that, but I think that
Yeah.
sometimes people go too far in that direction, and we do need figures of hope for the sake of hope, not unquestioned hope, but yeah, having hope that isn't. I don't want to use this word because feel like it has connotations to it in this case, but using hope that isn't strictly justified, you know, I think it's really underrated in a lot of people's mindsets. Because we'll live in a lot of tough times, and humanity's been through many tough and weird and terrifying times. But I don't know. It's like if you don't have any hope about it, if you decide to let go of hope just for the sake of it, and like if you have to find it in something like religion, then whatever, as long as you don't weaponize it. It's like, what are you still around for if you don't have that hope? Not that you shouldn't be here, but like, what are you living to the next day for if you don't have it? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that is why Superman, for all of the jokes and shit about him that are out there in media, has stood the test of time so well. Because
Yeah.
humans need hope.
Yeah. That's about it. I'm shocked at how good like a note because I presume we're about to end the episode. I am
Probably.
I'm dumbfounded at how wonderful of a note that we were that we managed to end this on. And I feel very good about that. Yeah.
All right.
Anyway,
That's the end of the
so
show. Get out of here.
do you wanna show your website and shit, and I'll do my shit.
MrsAshley.gay, MISSUS Ashley.gay. You can find all of my socials in there on there, everything I do. At some point in the next couple of months, there's going to be a comic book podcast going out. Episode one's already recorded, and episode two is happening this weekend. So once we get a couple more of those, it'll start coming out.
Wonderful. Yeah, and everything that I do that you would care at all about, you can find. I'll always put somewhere in improvvr.co.uk. That's improv then an r.co.uk. Discord servers, social media, etc. And yeah, so have a lovely time.